Hello, this is Zach from MyCodeTeacher.com. Today we're going to be working with multiple class files and learning how to transfer data between each of these class files. Now the class files we're going to be using are UI view controllers, and we're going to take a button and we're going to set text in the first view controller in a UI text field, and in the second view controller we're going to pull that same text that we set in the first view controller to show up in the second view controller. This is a common question. A lot of developers are coming and asking questions on how to retain data and how to pull it from one class file to another. So this should be a good tutorial for those of you who have those questions. Let's go ahead and get started by opening up Xcode. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, New Project, and I'm going to make it a view-based application, and I'm simply just going to call it Data. Alright, now you'll notice here right off the bat we've got Data App Delegate and Data View Controller. The most important thing to note when you need to retrieve data from a class file is that you need to have the same instance of each class file. So what we're going to do is we're going to initialize each of these view controllers. We're going to add one more later, but we're going to initialize each of these in the Data App Delegate. And fortunately for us, Apple gives us a nice method that we can call to get the same instance of a data app delegate in any class file that we use. So we're going to open up all of our instances in the data app delegate and pull the data from these other classes through the app delegate. If you don't know what I mean, it'll get more simple as we go along in this tutorial, but let's go ahead and get started by adding our second view controller. We have our first one set up, but we need our second one. So we're going to go to our resources folder here, and I'm going to go to add new file, and I'm going to make it a view nib file. Go ahead and click next, and we'll go ahead and call this second view controller. Go ahead and click on finish. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to open up our main window before we even start messing with the second view controller nib file, and just like Apple did, they have a pre-dragged in view controller for the data view controller, so we're going to do the same thing for the second view controller. Now I'm going to go to Tools, Library. I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to drag in a UI view controller. Now we need to do a few things to it. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to Tools, Inspector, and we need to name this second view controller from the class identity. Alright? Now what we need to do is in the first tab you'll see it has a nib name, and we already made a nib for this called second view controller, so we're going to go ahead and plug that in here. Second view controller, it already shows up, and as you see it says loaded from second view controller. Alright, so what we need to do now before we can even start messing with the second view controller.xib file is we need to write these class files to the project. So I'm going to go ahead and click on second view controller and go to File, Write Class Files. As you can see, it says Save As Second View Controller. If it doesn't say that, then you didn't put in the class identity, so make sure you did that. We're going to go ahead and automatically put this in the Classes folder and make sure Create.h file is checked, and go ahead and click Save. Go ahead and check this box and click Add, and as you can see, the files are now in the project. Go ahead and drag them up here just to organize ourselves here. And we need to specify a superclass, so I'm going to go ahead and do that by specifying this as a UI view controller, and go ahead and save that. Now we can go ahead and open up our second view controller nib file. Now what we need to do is in Files Owner we need to specify what class this is referencing. So as you can see, class, we're going to set this to second view controller. Now the files owner now knows this is a view controller, and it's going to give us two outlets. It's going to give us the search display controller and the view outlet. It's important that we connect this view outlet to the actual view file right here. If we don't, it'll crash. Let's go ahead and save that. And we'll go ahead and save interface builder file here, and we'll just go to build, make sure there's no errors. So build succeeded, we are good to go. Now let's go ahead and go into our appdelegate.h file, we're going to go ahead and add the second view controller class directly below the data view controller. So let's go ahead and put in second view controller, the semicolon there, and now let's go ahead and add second view controller here. So what we're doing is we're basically changing these values from private variables to public variables. So we're going to go ahead and also add down here property non-atomic retain, keeping this in memory here, IB outlet, second view controller, and we'll go ahead and call this second view controller with a lowercase s. It's important not to name this the same thing as the class, otherwise you'll get a few errors there. So make this a lowercase s, and that should be all that we need to do for the header file of the data app delegate. Now before we forget, we've specified that we're going to make this an IB outlet. So go ahead and go to main window.nib, and we're going to go ahead and click on the app delegate, and you'll see the outlet pop in here, second view controller, which is what we just created, and we're going to drag this to here to the second view controller, so now it's connected. Okay, we'll leave this open in case we need it again later. Now let's go ahead and go to the .m file. Since we've decided that we were going to make the second view controller class a property, we need to synthesize it. So we're going to set this to second view controller, remember with a lowercase s, not an uppercase, my fault. And just one more simple little thing we're going to need to do, actually two more. We're going to import the second view controller.h file here so that the structure of this view controller is loaded in with the app delegate, the properties and the variables and everything that's part of this UI view controller class. That way the app delegate will know how to access its properties if we have any. And we're going to also, for memory purposes, we're going to go ahead and release the second view controller when this is deallocated. Alright, let's go ahead and set up our structure now for both of these view files. We're going to start with the data view controller nib file. As you can see, it's a gray background. We can change that to white. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't really like the gray background, but that's your preference. So we're going to make this white, and we're going to add a few items in here. We're going to go ahead and we'll just go ahead and call this view 1 so we know that this is the first view. Put that in the center right there. Good enough. And we're going to put another label right here, and we're going to call this my text. Going to put a button down here called next view. Drag that out a little bit. And we need a text field. We'll just put that right there. And another button right here. We're going to call this set text. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this set text button. We're going to just set a default text like hello world into this UI text view here. Okay? And when we go to the next view, we're going to make the structure the exact same, only we're going to call this text right here, and then we're going to call this display text, and it's going to pull the text value from this UI text field and display it in the text field on the next view. So actually it's going to be going through the app delegate, pulling the data from this first view and showing it in the second view. So it'll actually be a pretty useful function. So let's go ahead and set up the structure of the second view now. Go ahead and go to second view, double click that, and it'll open it right up. So in the label here, we're going to go ahead and put in second view. Alright. And we're going to put another button down here called go back. Call this text here. Put a UI text field in here. And another button below it, display text. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll start with the first view, and we'll make the display or the set text button work. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the .h file of data view controller.h, and we need to make the UI text field an IB outlet. So we're going to go ahead and take care of this UI text field, and we're going to make an IB action for when we actually set the text. IB action set text. And we're also going to need one IB action called switch views, which will be the lower right hand corner button, which is going to go to the second view controller. So now what we need to do is, remember, we need to make this text field pointer from private to public. So we're going to do that by calling property non-atomic retain, which is going to keep this in memory for us. UI text field, it's an IB outlet text field. Alright, so now when we actually use the app delegate or the second view controller to pull this value from the text field, it will know that this is a public value that we can retrieve. So another thing we need to do is we need to import two more files. We need to import the data app delegate, and we also need to import second view controller.h. We're going to need to be referencing both of these files as we go along. We're going to need the second view controller when we switch the views. We're going to need the data app delegate because that's what's going to be our reference point. We're going to be using the data app delegate to switch to the second view. So we are now done with the data view controller.h file. Let's go ahead and program the .m file. Now, we had made an IB action called switch views, so let's go ahead and start with that one. So IB action, switch views. Now this is the method that we need to call to get the same instance of all of our files. Remember, Apple gives us a method, and it's called UI application shared application delegate, and we're going to use this to retrieve the same instance of the second view controller and the data view controller. So how this works is we're going to say data view controller, or data app delegate, excuse me. We're going to say app delegate. Oh, man. So fortunately, Apple gives us a method that we can use to get the current instance of the data app delegate. Now this is important because we set our instances of the data view controller and the second view controller in the data app delegate right here. So anytime we refer to these class files, we're going to use it through the data app delegate, and then we'll have the same instance each time. Hence, we'll be able to pull the data from both of those class files. So when we switch views here, I'm going to go ahead and call the data app delegate, and I'm going to call this app delegate equals, now Apple has this format here, data app delegate, and it's a UI application, references the application, shared application delegate. So this is returning the current instance of the app delegate to this pointer variable right here, app delegate. Now what we can do now is we'll do app delegate view controller present model view controller app delegate dot second view controller animated. We'll go ahead and say yes. So what's happening here is we've called the current instance of the app delegate. We've called the view controller, which is the data view controller, as we specified right here. Data view controller was set to view controller. Okay, so we're calling this current view controller, and we're presenting the model view controller, which is basically calling another view controller and placing it on top of the data view controller. And we called the second view controller to be placed on top of this current view controller, as specified right here. App delegate second view controller. So again, we used the app delegate and called the second view controller through the app delegate to be shown on top. Now, I knew this, the present model view controller, because in the documentation, if I click on, or if I type in UI view controller class reference, you'll see right here, let's see, the model view controller is the controller for the active model view, that is the view that is temporarily displayed on top of the view managed by the receiver. Then we have this function called present model view controller, which basically pushes the current view out of the way and puts the new view on top. So that's why we call present model view controller. As you can see, presents a model view managed by the given view controller to the user. So this is how we're switching views here. Let's go ahead and, before we forget, connect the button in the data view controller file. So I'm going to go ahead and double click here. Now in the file's owner we should see the action switch views. We do. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this switch views down here to next view, touch up inside, and save it. Excellent. So that should now work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make our second IB action, which is going to set the text of the text field. So we currently have IB action set text, and I'm going to say text field, which is what we named it, set text. And I'm just going to put in hello world. You can put in whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and Command S, save it, and let's go ahead and now connect this. So we not only need to connect the text field, but we also need to connect the button. So click on Files Owner again. We've got our set text button, touch up inside, and our text field. And go ahead and Command S to save this, and that should work. So I'm going to go ahead and build, make sure we have no errors or warnings. Okay, we've got 2 warnings. That's right. We also need to synthesize our text field. Remember, you can make it a property, but it's really not going to work unless you synthesize it. So we need to synthesize text field. Make sure we build and go. No warnings. Build succeeded. So I'm going to go ahead and build and go and see what we got here. The view should switch. They won't go back, but let's go ahead and click set text. So the text sets to hello world, and the next view pops right up. Excellent, just like we designed it to do. So the second view pops up, and what we're going to do now is when we hit display text, it's going to pull the same text as the first view and display it in this text field right here. And then we're also going to make the go back button work just to make it complete. So let's go ahead and quit the simulator, and we'll go ahead and go into the second view controller.h file. So what we need to do is, again, since we're going to be modifying the properties of the text field, we're going to need to make it an IB outlet. So UI text field, I'm going to go ahead and call this text field. And we need 2 IB actions here. We need a go back, that way it'll go back to the first view, and we also need a display text method. Now we also need to, we don't really need the foundation, that's already included, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to go ahead and import data app delegate.h, because again we need to reference the app delegate for everything. And we also need data view controller.h. Go ahead and save, and we'll go to the .m file here. So let's go ahead and start by building our go back method here. And again, to reference the current instance of the data app delegate, we're going to call data app delegate. We're going to call this app delegate, data app delegate, UI application, shared application, delegate. And a semicolon. So that again returns the current instance to the pointer app delegate right there. And now what we need to do is we want to remove the current view off of the view controller and go back to the original one. Now referencing the documentation again, we'll come back here, and to get rid of the current model view of the view controller, they have a method for that, and it's called dismiss model view controller animated. So it basically dismisses the top view of the view controller and goes back to the last view in the hierarchy of views. So we're going to use dismiss model view controller animated. Go back here. So again, we need to use the current view controller that we're working with here, and in this case it would be app delegate. Remember, we need the same instance, so using self in this case would be a really bad idea. Even though we are in the second view controller, we need the same instance. That's so important to know, otherwise it will not work. So we're calling app delegate here, second view controller, dismiss model view controller, and then animated, we're going to go ahead and say yes, just to keep it animated. And that is removing the second view controller from the top of the views here. Now, let's go ahead and build our second IB action here called display text. And this is the part most of you are waiting for. Again, we need to reference the data app delegate. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. Now you could make this a property so you don't have to keep typing this whole long sentence here, but we only need to use it twice, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in here only twice. Now what we're going to do is text field set text and app delegate dot view controller, which is accessing the first view, dot text field. We made it a property, so it shows up here. Dot text field dot text. And what we're doing, just to explain this here, we went through the app delegate, called the same instance of the first view, and the first view has a public property called text field, and we're accessing that text field's property, which is the text in that property. So we're actually getting data from the first view through the app delegate. Text field set text app delegate dot view controller dot text field dot text. Go ahead and save that. Build, make sure there's no errors. Build succeeded. Now we need to connect the display text and the go back buttons, and then we should be good to test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the second view controller, go to the files owner, go to the files owner here of the second view. Now we have the go back method, which we need to connect to the go back button. So go ahead and drag, touch up inside, and then display text, drag, touch up inside, and the text field. Now go ahead and Command S to save it. Build, no errors, build and go. Now we're going to go to the next view and go back, so we know our views are working now. And we're going to go ahead and set the text, which is hello world. We'll go to the next view and click on display text, and there you have it, hello world. So that's going to conclude my tutorial today on displaying data. As you can see, once you set up the structure properly, it's actually pretty easy. Everything goes to the app delegate, uses the same instances of all the class files that you add, and it becomes just a matter of accessing the properties of the class files. It's actually pretty simple once you get the hang of it. So hopefully this was helpful. My name is Zach. I'll see you next time.